Today I'm working on broccoli cheese soup. Now this is something that's got a lot of calories, even though I'm slimming it down a little bit. So it's something you're going to watch how you combine that with your rest of the meal. I've got about a cup of onion, and it's been in the pan for about 3 minutes. It's chopped fairly well, but we're going to do some blending of this to smooth it off a little bit later. I've also got 2 cloves of garlic. So we cook the onion 3 to 5 minutes, trying to keep it from browning. But I only want to cook the onion here until it starts being really fragrant, which will probably be 30 seconds to a minute. And I'm smelling it now, so I think we can go ahead. The next thing we're going to add is 3 cups of fat-free, reduced sodium chicken broth. Now, there is still some sodium in here. And there's going to be sodium in the cheese, of course, and there's going to be some sodium in the milk. So we're not going to actually add salt to this because we're going to get a lot of salt coming in later. If you find when it's done that you yourself need a little bit of a hit of salt in there, then you could do that at the end. Also remember that a lot of things people use with soups like this are croutons and crackers and breads that also provide some salty flavor to them. So that's not going to be something that you're going to need to worry about. I'm going to use these for a garnish later on, so I'm pulling them out now. I didn't remember they were there. I've got a pound of broccoli florets. Now, these are seasonal most of the time, but if you have broccoli in your freezer, chopped broccoli, this is a nice way to use that. You could use a pound of frozen broccoli, chopped frozen broccoli, and this would work really, really well in that instance. Leave this on medium-high heat and bring it back up to a boil and turn it down and let it simmer about 10 minutes. We want to pretty well tenderize the broccoli. Now normally if you're trying to do that you'd put a lid on the pan. But this time what I want to happen is I want all those sulfur compounds that are going to come out of the broccoli as it cooks, I want them out of the pan so that I don't change the color any more than necessary. If those are retained in the pan with a lid, then it's going to turn a lot more of that olive brown color that I don't want. So I want to keep the color bright. It's still going to dull some because we're cooking it long enough to tenderize it, but we want to keep it as much as we can. So again, put this in 10 minutes. This is going to be basically a cream of broccoli soup, or broccoli and cheese soup, because of the cheese. And so we're not going to use a heavy fat milk here. What I've got is about 1/3 of a cup of flour and then 2½ cups of reduced fat milk. And we're just simply going to whisk these together as an easy way to do this without developing a lot of lumps. And if you do have 1 or 2, we're going to, as I mentioned earlier, blend this a little bit, so you should be able to get rid of them. But you should be able to keep them at a minimum if you just add the milk slowly and whisk as you go. So this is going to go in here. Don't do this too far ahead because the flour will settle back down. And then if you do it a little bit ahead of time or even right at the minute, you're going to want to whisk it again. Our broccoli has cooked fairly well. I actually have been kind of chunking it as it's been cooking to try and break down some of those big pieces. If you're doing it raw as I did, you may want to make sure that you have as few of the stems as you can and just get those florets in there. It's just a pound of florets you need. All right, I'm going to put the milk in now. And this, once we get this in here, this is going to cook for another 5 minutes at a medium-high heat. And we still have some flour there. I'm just going to leave it there. What you could do if you chose is to add a little bit of that liquid back to it, stir it together. See if I can get the milk itself without getting the little lumpy parts there, but I think that'll thicken it up fine. Again, 5 minutes on this. And when that's thickened, we're going to add a little bit of pepper to it. And then we're going to add some cheese. All right, remember to stir this the entire time that it's cooking so that the milk doesn't scorch on the bottom. Once your 5 minutes is up, notice that it's thickened, and so we're ready for the next step, which is adding the cheese. Now, the original recipe called for 8 ounces of cheese, which was a lot, and when I did it, it tasted like cheese. So I've cut it back. You may want to cut it back even a little bit more. I've shredded 6 ounces of Swiss cheese, and the step here is simply to stir until that is melted in. Now, you could also cube it fairly finely, and that works okay. It doesn't melt quite as much. A lot of times the broccoli soup that we get is made with a processed cheddar, and I wanted to do something with a different kind of cheese rather than a processed one. And so rather than use the light one, I've actually used real cheese. And we'll see how this works here. I also wanted to stir in about 1/4 of a teaspoon of pepper. And then what I'd recommend is that you taste it and see if it's got the amount of pepper that you like. Remember, it will depend on how you're serving it as to whether or not you want to add any salt to it when you check for flavor at this point. I'm going to serve it with some bread. If you serve it with cornbread, there's going to be sodium in both of those. Croutons also are going to have some. Now, you could use a food processor for this. You could use a blender. If you use either one of those, be careful because particularly the blender, the food will expand when you turn the blender on because it's hot, and so you may have issues with it coming out the top. So take that little hole cap out of the middle of the lid, cover it with a towel and work that. I'm going to use an immersion blender. The trick on this is you need to keep these little openings submerged, otherwise it's going to be everywhere also. So either way, you need to use a little bit of caution. This is to taste, how much you blend it, how much you put it with an immersion blender. Whichever one of these you do, it's going to be to taste, so as smooth as you'd like it. I like mine fairly smooth, so I did it a little bit more than you might like to. Play with it, taste it a couple of times, see if it's where you want it to be, and then ladle it up. This makes 6 servings, and it is less caloric than some of those that you would get if you went out to eat a lot of times, because we did use skim milk on this. I'm going to put a couple of fresh broccolis on the top just as garnish. And then I'm serving mine with just a piece of sourdough bread, which is also going to cut the caloric count down from if you went into a restaurant. A lot of times there you'll get it in a bread bowl where you're going to get a lot more bread than you either need or than you're going to use. So just a slice of sourdough in this case. I hope you'll try this one. It's broccoli cheese soup. For Oklahoma Gardening, I'm Barbara Brown.